we can't just do that because if you're not here, then who knows what the fuck we're talking about, right? Like we can't just let you go,
You
right?
are the podcast, my
You
friend.
are
Good.
you are the informed part of the fucking podcast. Like,
Good morning,
Come on.
everyone. It is July 4 at 8 a.m.
oh,
on July 4. Happy birthday to America. Hope you guys are having your
woo.
hamburgers and beers lined up. Mr. America, how you doing? How you feeling today?
I'm all right, man. I'm on my first vacation in God knows how long. Some very kind friends have brought me out to complete seclusion out in rural Vermont. I'm in the middle of
Oof.
fucking nowhere. It's dead
Are you
quiet.
going hiking or something?
Fuck no.
No
No, I mean
chance.
like we can't. There's no way we're doing that. But no, but it is actually kind of nice to get away from things a little bit and get some perspective if that's possible. So of course I'm here recording a podcast, writing an op-ed, the things you do on vacation.
Great. So the people who actually listen to the show will know we missed last week because we were all on vacation. Costin went out to the seaside, I believe. I was in Europe for a little bit. So we're back after a week. I want to thank Hamid Kashfi for popping on with us on our last episode and giving us
Right.
kind of like a real on the ground look at what's happening around cyber activity, Iran, Israel. Costin, I see there's a bandage on your hand. What's going on with you?
Yeah, that's because I didn't go to the seaside.
Oh, you
He's
didn't.
doing
So I
drugs,
was supposed to go to the seaside with the family, but I got sick, so I ended up doing some IVs and still doing them for another week or so. But I said to myself, there's no way I'm missing another episode because people are complaining. We've done like a LinkedIn show yesterday, and I said, please do listen to the Three Body podcast. We are filming every week, and people in the audience were like, no, you didn't film the last week.
not
Where's the
every
last week
week.
episode?
What the fuck?
Let's get to it because this is a holiday today. I gotta go put some ribs on the smoker. We got a
Ooh.
report this week. Let's start this week with a report out of ANSSI. Who is ANSSI, by the way? Is that the French equivalent of our NSA? Is it something different? Juanito, what is ANSSI?
That's an excellent question. No, so ANSSI is one of the French intelligence agencies. They do have a slightly, I mean, I don't know that their remit really maps perfectly one to one because they do have like an internal defense component and a big cyber defense component, but they're definitely not the only ones, right? Like the French also have like their own cybercom, they have DGSE, there's a bunch of different places, but ANSSI has been excellent in their sharing relationships and in providing us with a lot of really good reports over the years. So huge shout out, big fan of our ANSI friends.
And we're talking about ANSSI because this week they released a report on Houken, Houken, seeking a path by living on the edge with 0 days. And this is basically documenting the use of 0 days linked to our best friends at Ivanti. Some Ivanti CSA 0 days that were targeting French organizations. You got a chance to look at the report, Costin. Juanito, which one do you want to jump in first? Why is this relevant?
Go ahead, Juanito.
Why is it gotta be me? No. I
Because
mean,
I'm the
it's
one who is sick.
but you're the one who reads this shit. No, so no, it's actually a pretty interesting report, and I won't do it justice. I read it a couple of weeks ago, and then have kind of been looking through again. But it looks to be related to what Mandiant calls UNC 5174. I want to say.
Correct.
Looks, likely, obviously we would expect this to be the Chinese. Apparently, what I want to start describing it as Ivanti is giving the Chinese 0 days. Maybe that'll kind of rile them up a little bit more. But they suspect it's like an MSS contractor as far as like Mandiant is concerned, and they talk about it as an initial access broker. For us, like on the Sentinel Lab side, like it looks related to some of the Purple Haze stuff that we put out recently. We put out a couple of blogs on these guys.
The Purple Haze document, we spoke about it on the pod maybe a
Yeah.
week or 2 weeks ago, which
Yeah.
was SentinelOne documentation of Chinese reconnaissance against security vendors, which was kind of like
Yeah.
your thing saying, hey, we're being targeted here. This is some of the things we've been seeing. There appears to be some overlap between that reconnaissance and this
Yeah,
Houken
I mean,
story.
there's some overlap, but frankly, like on the Purple Haze side of things, like it's such a like I think Alex Milenkowski did an amazing job trying to like put forth a consistent picture of what we're seeing. But if you look at the report closely, it's like groups A, B, C, D, and E of like different types of activity, a lot of initial access stuff going after different companies. Like we were able to like just kind of bat it away fairly easily on our side because of the monitoring we have on our infrastructure. But what we ended up finding is it hitting like a bunch of these different logistics companies and suppliers and so on. So anyways, I don't want to hijack it on that end. It was interesting to see sort of the relationship, but what ANSSI is putting forth is a much more comprehensive picture of kind of what this larger group is doing. And, you know, I think it's a pretty cool name. Let's just start there.
There's a little bit of weirdness here. ANSSI is saying the use of 0 days by this threat actor is new to their knowledge. So this is an actor that has been traditionally doing what, Costin? What is ANSSI trying to communicate to us here?
Well, first of all, I think it's good to say that probably this is one of the most interesting reports from the ANSSI that I have seen. And props to them for releasing them on a regular basis. And these are, in my opinion, they're thorough reports, they're quality information, quality research. Obviously, they have very skilled analysts who can lift. We used to have a couple of researchers in our team, if you remember, back in the days, who worked for ANSSI in the past. And I can say for sure that they're very knowledgeable and very skilled. By the way, in regards to your previous question, I think probably CISA is the equivalent of that, because in essence is the National Agency for the Security of Cyber Systems. So more or less CISA, yeah.
CISA like remit, but I don't think it's appropriate to do that to ANSSI.
Correct.
Say something nice. Stop it.
Yeah.
But there is, I think, this very significant trend that we've seen over the years that in the past, agencies like the NSA spy agencies, they were the ones responsible for this side of things. And some people in the industry, they were kind of shy of sharing things. They were like, you guys spy on us anyway, so we don't want to share with you any kind of findings and information. And I think that this trend, which maybe started about 10 years ago, that different nation states started spinning separate organizations, separate from their spy agencies, like for instance, in the UK, the NCSC, correct? In France, ANSSI, in the UK, CISA, in the US, CISA, and so on and so on. In Romania, it's, I guess, the NSC. And just to separate things and kind of bring trust on the table so that companies share more, there's more cooperation, they can share more. Now, in particular to this report that they're talking about, the group described by Mendiant in the past as ANC 5174 is definitely one of these maybe more elusive and less seen groups. They're not kind of the mainstream threat actors that we are accustomed to. And probably one of the defining things about them would be the targeting of network appliances, leveraging exploits for network appliances, and so on and so on. And I would assume that probably this is one of the groups which works a lot with others, just initial access, taking care of things like initial access and then passing access to other groups and working in tandem with other groups. I admit that because, nowadays it's very, very difficult to get your hands on anything which is related to appliances. So, for instance, the UK NCSC that we just mentioned, they posted like recently 2 reports. I don't know if you guys saw that. One of them was called Shurek. And the other one was, what was it? Umbrella stand. And there were absolutely no samples whatsoever for umbrella stand and shoe rack, which, by the way, are related to coat hanger, the very famous coat hanger report.
Okay.
So, completing the picture of things
but
you
that,
have
that
in
was
your...
that was a Dutch name, right? Like if I
Correct.
remember,
was coat hanger.
Coat hanger was
Go
Dutch.
inside baseball on me. What was coat hanger?
Coat hanger was this cluster of activity tied to compromising routers that the Dutch wrote about, and I think that you can CSC also wrote about it a bit. But there there's no samples anywhere. Like as much as you want to analyze that, there's no samples. I think there was one binary that appeared on VT a couple of months ago, but it wasn't like related to those router implants. It was just some kind of just related tool, but not one of those implants.
How are we gonna get samples? Like, where the fuck are the samples supposed to come from?
I think
right?
samples, you're only going to get samples ever if the people who write these reports upload them to VT. And in particular, in relation to Umbrella, Stand, and Shurek, that, by the way, I was going to post the hashes of the new samples that just hit VT. It's like a dozen of them. I would assume that the NCSC is uploading them. Like someone there, like Oli or someone like that, is just pushing them to Virus Total. So kudos for that. Thank you. But yeah, in general, it's very difficult to come by these router implants. Anything that is router related, it's almost impossible to get your hands on unless you do IR, like Mandiant and others.
Well, and if you do IR, you're doing it through like in some relation to one of these fucking companies, right? Like in that sense, I'd like to start framing it as these companies are giving these attackers 0 days. I don't care, like that may not be the way that the relationship actually plays out. But the other side of it is if they actually cared for the threat intel industry and for their customers, then they should be putting out these components. They should be putting out the YAR rules. They should be putting out the information that only they are privy to. They don't want to upload it to VT? Okay, share it privately, but they're not doing that for anybody. I know government folks who are sitting around going, well, if only we had these components. So like, I don't think Ivanti or Fortinet or any of these motherfuckers are helping at all. And I'm going to keep beating that drum until the day I watch those companies burn to the fucking ground, hopefully. But let's see what happens.
They're not going to burn to the ground. Stock price has been rising alongside all these ODA reports. There's an element to this report that stand out to me, which is, Costin mentioned it there, like initial access brokers. But there's a component here that suggests that this is a private group that might be doing some deployment of crypto miners, some cyber crime, profit-driven activities. Are we suspecting that this is a private sector offensive actor that's connected to a state? Is that what ANSSI is trying to communicate?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, this is probably what they're saying in there, and we are seeing more and more this kind of a trend where the private sector actors, especially Chinese, I mean, but also a lot of other entities in other countries. I guess, for instance, in Russia, it's not as many private companies that operate as initial access brokers or something like that, but it's more like cyber criminals, right?
Individuals
and,
mostly. Yeah.
Forums like breach forums, League-Base, and the likes that help a lot with the initial access. But otherwise, in China especially, there's a lot of these, maybe some of them smaller companies, like 10, 15, 20 employees, something like that, that suddenly, just they appear out of nowhere. And in a couple of months, suddenly they have like a 30,000 devices botnet for orbs, like an operational relay boxes, and anonymization and pushing spam if needed, brute forcing credentials, tunneling access back and forth to the CNCs. So it's a very dynamic market, especially I guess in the past year. I've seen a lot of presentations, like public and private, dealing with this particular type of not very large companies, most of them Chinese, that specialize in initial access and passing the access to the more sophisticated groups out there.
Right, and we've always been speculating on the connection between ransomware actors who've compromised every organization and the ability of nation state and other actors to get that kind of access. I just want to add quickly that ANSSI also published an advisory on live exploitation of a Citrix NetScaler vulnerability, CVSS 9.2. Citrix notes that these gateways are end of life and customers should migrate to support version, but active exploitation is confirmed. So we are getting some advisories and warnings from ANSSI, which you guys have quite rightly applauded. The question for you quickly, Costin, is you applauded the quality of the ANSSI report. Did you get IOCs, like in that specific Houken report? Were you able to go hunting?
I admit I haven't been able to go hunting yet because for two reasons. Because I was a bit sick this week, and two, I was hunting another interesting report which dropped just yesterday. But to my shame, you caught me unprepared because I didn't do any kind of hunting related to the Houken report from ANSSI.
Well, let's get to it. You went hunting for Night Eagle, obviously.
I went hunting for something else too.
You went hunting for Night Eagle, which is the other report we wanted to flag at the very top from the... I don't know how to pronounce this, Costin. What's the name of the company?
Qianxin
Pangu.
Yeah.
Qianxin
Pangu.
So a Chinese security research are they a security research outfit? Are they an anti-malware company?
Well,
these are the
security vendor?
These are the
company.
RedDrip guys, right?
Yes,
correct.
RedDrip.
And it's a big
We've
company.
seen RedDrip stuff before. Like they probably put out the better report on any of the U.S. stuff. I remember the Lamberts thing, and VVP 47 wasn't theirs, right? Was that RedDrip as well?
I don't remember.
Which one, Juan? Sorry?
The BVP 47.
No, that was Pangu, right? That was Pangu.
Yeah, I'll go double check.
But the funny thing is that now, I don't know if it's a translation issue, but they say Qianxin Pangu. So I don't know if they bought Pangu or is like some kind of a language artifact, translation artifact there, but that's how they call it, like the Qianxin Pangu.
Qian Pangu. Since 2003, this company has been continuously tracking a top APT group that holds an unknown exchange vulnerability exploit chain and has a substantial funds to purchase a large amount of network access VPN services. The top line here is that a Chinese security research firm exposing North American, I would guess, US APT here, right, Costin? I mean, that's what you read at the top end.
I don't know if it's US. So like the way I approach pretty much any report is as follows. I get whatever IOCs they have in there. I put them through my systems and let's see if we know anything about it. So what surprised me about this is there was nothing in my systems about this stuff. And in particular, and I'll tell you what is the most impressive thing here, which is why I believe we were dealing with a sophisticated actor behind it. But I had like almost zero passive DNS information about the CNCs they posted about. And I was thinking, like, how is it possible? There's like almost zero useful passive DNS information about this bunch, like a dozen or so different CNCs. And what these guys are doing is basically they're parking their CNCs most of the time to IP addresses like I think it was 144, 144, 144, 144, or like a different
000.
Yeah, 00. And only like for a very brief second or moment of time, they flip it. They basically wait for the victim to ping, and then they flip it back. And now, unless you have taps in China or like somewhere in there that see the DNS traffic, then you don't get to observe these resolutions. I mean, you can, of course, brute force resolve these domains over and over as much as you want. But if you don't catch that particular interval, then you're not going to have the IP addresses of their real CNCs. So I thought that was
clever.
A clever trick. Yeah, I've seen it in the past. There's a few other groups who exercise this trick as well. But like in particular in this case, I thought was an interesting combination of that plus an exchange 0 day plus a bunch of other things they talk about, like a .NET binary malware that is custom to this group, as well like a chisel or Kiesel modified version, that they're using in these intrusions, mostly against Chinese companies, as far as we can tell. Now, I did see that they do some kind of attribution in there, which is all based on the attacker's access to that Kiesel backdoor.
And some time zone, some working time zone things.
They put it like to this time, which to me it felt like very, very strange. So they are saying like, oh yeah, the attackers must be in the Seattle, Vancouver area, like time zone. which I have not seen before.
It's not the same as California, all of California as well.
Well, true, but I tell you, like, whenever people were talking about Western threat actors, North American threat actors, the time zones that I have seen the most from different researchers was
Virginia and
GMT
Washington,
minus
DC.
4. It was GMT minus 4. That was the one.
Let me circle back to a question for you, Juanito. Whenever we get APT reports out of Chinese companies pointing the finger at the US, we normally poo-poo the quality of it, one, because sometimes the quality is not up to par. At the same time, we always say there's no way they don't have visibility. They're just way too smart. There are a lot of, these companies have clever researchers and hunters and so on. So we've always kind of lived on both sides of the coin here. When you read this report, the question for you, one, is how is the quality? And did we get IOCs did we get IOCs? They claim I saw they published a free self-check tool and some cleanup tools alongside of extensive IOCs and so on. What was your response to the report from a quality perspective? And what are they communicating here?
I mean, I think that the quality of the research is pretty decent. I think the issues that you get with these sorts of so let's start there, right? Like I mentioned, it's RedDrip because RedDrip has done a really good job before, and they did it with the Lamberts, which is one of the hardest groups to track. Period. So obviously, I have a lot of respect for the researchers there. There's two things where I think they come off as a little. I don't want to say amateurish. Like technically, they're doing a good job. But there's a couple of things that don't quite go up to mustard. The first one is they're obviously trying to sell their product in the middle of it. Like, look at how great our EDR was. It collected the memory thing. Look at how great our other component is that does the DNS.
Spotted it in 10 minutes and cut off the C2 in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, sure, cool. Which is fine. It's just like, it messes with sort of you're not, right? Like we try to avoid all that.
You read a Microsoft report?
Yeah, but I'm talking about good reports. I'm not trying to measure them by whatever other marketing bullshit. The other, which like it's fine. That's what pays for these things. The other one is on the attribution side, and that's where I think these very, very smart, very capable researchers. I'm not sure that I even want to blame them for what's happening there, because that's where it starts to feel like a little more politicized, right? Like to say the time zone analysis puts you at wherever, and therefore it's a North American attacker. It's like, it's just, that is one of the indicators that we would normally point to. And then you couch it exactly as what it is, which is we have some vague indication that they're probably working, a 9-to-5 job. Look, you have stuff that matters, right? They're working a 9-to-5 job. Time zone carry a
big weight, though, right? Like working time zones and compilation time zones and timestamps.
Some weight. It carries some, especially when you can do like a proper pattern of life analysis over a consistent long period of time, which I don't know. Like, sure.
Because I remember we did this with Flame. That was one of the top things that we had done.
We've done it with a ton of groups, and it's usually good. But the whole point is attribution purely on cyber components is almost entirely a matter of a variety of indications in the right direction, and you are able to do a sort of soft assessment of what we're dealing with, and that's it. In this case, as in many Chinese reports, what you get is kind of trying to mountain out of the molehill a little too much, right? Like you go, there's a little bit of indication, but like the other things they're pointing to is like, well, they're using US-based, operators for their infrastructure, and you go, yeah, everyone is, because they're all US-based, right? Like what the Chinese are using things in DigitalOcean.
Are you questioning the attribution here?
No, I'm not questioning it. I just think that if you're asking me about the quality, about like the quality of the threat intel, this is a pretty decent report on certain technical ends that kind of feels a little weak on certain other components like the attribution side. And I don't know if I even blame the the researchers themselves, because I suspect that there's a political component to putting out an English report that talks about what they presume to be a North American or a US based APT without saying much.
They presented it at the conference in Singapore in this year, earlier this
Malaysia.
year. In Malaysia, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
There's even a screenshot in the report from the talk there that talks about attack patterns and so on. Which is something we missed. It must have been a private thing, or no one actually reported on it.
Nobody invited us to this Malaysian cyber defense.
But nobody tweeted, or usually we would see a tweet from someone at the conference, or we would see something. So it might have been a private event anyway. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, putting that shit aside, I mean, I am obviously fascinated, and I am obviously really interested, and I'm in no way dodging this thing because it may be North American or not. Like, I'm fascinated by any of this kind of attackers. The other
July
side,
4, we need to celebrate this stuff.
yeah, so we gotta celebrate, American leadership in cyberspace. But the other side of this that I think is more interesting is what is being spied on, right? Like they call out that this attacker is going after their like AI frontier labs, LLM companies, semiconductor companies in China, and now that I think
is economic espionage, which is
I don't even know. I mean, it's economic. You can say it's economic espionage to some degree, but frankly, I think it is very much, without reading too much into too little, it is an expression of American or Western anxiety about China's rising dominance in some of these competitive spaces. And I'm glad to hear somebody's fucking paying attention, because I think this is the greatest source of anxiety for the billionaires and the administration folks right now, who think that the most important thing the US needs to do is get a handle on this coming paradigm shift, because otherwise, unless we figure out a way to turn AI into $1 trillion GDP producing thing, then we're all going to die, and like China's going to become like the hegemon of the world. And they may not be wrong. So I'm glad somebody's paying attention.
Kostya, you said you focused on this report and did your hunting. Couple of things. There's a description of a Microsoft Exchange O-Day attack chain. What do you know about this? Have you been able to capture the O-Day? What can you tell me about that part?
I mean, they suspect there is this 0 day based on the logs they analyzed. But as far as I understand, the 0 day has not been captured. They just kind of postulate that this is how they break into some of the servers. And to do that, they leverage this unknown vulnerability, to steal the server's machine key. And then they just insert on C#.net, ASP.NET backdoor that they map to one of the fake /OWA auth lengths CN and the number .aspx, which they just access it from the web to gain control to that machine. So I think that.
You think they're right? Their documenting of this O-Day attack chain smells accurate to you?
I think it probably is. It has to be accurate. By the way, regarding what you guys were saying about is it espionage? Is it just awareness, geopolitical awareness? I remember there's a famous case when like a Western intelligence agency was spying on Airbus. I don't know if you guys remember this case. So they either they got caught or exposed spying on Airbus, and the reason they were spying on Airbus was that Airbus was bribing some politicians in order to win some contracts over Boeing. So it was in a way espionage against like commercial companies, but it's interesting that the goal was more in the line of stopping corruption or just to catch them doing bribes. So I wouldn't be surprised, if this is also the case
right,
here.
Costin, about like the new, and that's why I said I don't want to read too much into something so small. There are so many different reasons that you would spy on any target, right? And this is one of those areas where analyst bias tends to go way, 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 way too far. And I think the measure of expertise tends to be in restraint, in being able to say, you know what, we could guess that it's this, it would make sense that it's this other thing, but it's not pussyfooting or unnecessary hedging. It's good intelligence analysis practice to stop yourself and say, look, we're assuming X, Y, and Z, but frankly, that's why you
It
do.
could, yeah.
Well, that's why you do competing hypotheses, right? Like that's why, like that is the standard of intel
So
analysis.
talk
You
to your
go,
peers. Talk to your peers to and help them understand how you would like think through this nuance.
well, I don't have enough to go on. I really don't. That's why it makes like right? Like we're saying if it's a North America based actor, which means what? Like Canada, the US, or you're not, I doubt it's Mexico, right? So like, Canada, the US. And if we're talking about purely espionage, you go, okay, but what kind of espionage, right? Like they broke into these places. If you're telling me like you break into a frontier lab, it's a very different thing for you to say, well, they broke into an AI frontier lab and they were spying on the leadership. Or they broke into a frontier lab and they were trying to grab the weights of the models. Or they broke into a frontier lab and they were very interested in the finance department. Or they broke into a frontier lab and they were very interested in who works there. Like each one, like whatever it is that they did inside can give you a much greater indication of their intent. And honestly, it's why it makes it so hard. Sometimes like Western operations are easier to understand because they tend to be much more restrained and specific about what they go after. Whereas like you look at a Chinese op that is more smash and grab, and like they just walk in and they grab 400 gigabytes and walk out of like whatever they could get from every computer they could get, and you go, well, no fucking clue. They just came in here and they took everything they could get their hands on. And sometimes that just means like, well, it tells you, right? It's not necessarily the most sophisticated or the most constrained or the most quiet attacker. So that tells you something about the attacker, but it doesn't necessarily tell you something about the intent. Whereas like when you see a Western op that walks in and goes, we're only looking for the AutoCAD files available in this computer, you go, well, they really care about, I don't know, the structural integrity of the tunnels at an underground facility in Iran in the desert somewhere. It's like,
As a researcher, you have visibility into that level of what they're looking at and looking for?
It depends entirely on the means of collection, right? Like, do we have a really helpful victim that is doing the incident response with us and they're willing, and we get to see that stuff? Or a different way is like, did we get visibility into the command and control server and we can see what's being exfiltrated? Or it's hard-coded into the malware and we can see, well, the malware is designed to only go pick this stuff up. That doesn't happen as often as it used to, but those were the ways in which you could kind of surmise stuff about the op. Which is why I'm saying, like in this case, right, this is my version of like a theoretical competing hypothesis thing, but the absence of some of that stuff is just, that's where you see the lack of expertise shows in the lack of restraint in making those assessments.
Costin, does the mention of Microsoft Exchange zero-day attack chain have any relevance to you about where attribution might be coming from? I'm asking just because I'm reporting on my Patch Tuesday, every Microsoft Patch Tuesday. And there have been a ton of Microsoft Exchange bugs reported by the US government, US intelligence agencies. So there's been like some, I don't know if they flagged that there, because there's no evidence, right? They're just kind of surmising that that's how they got in. There's no evidence and they weren't able to capture the 0-day. They call it still undocumented. Question for you quickly, the self-help cleanup tool that they released, this organization exchange memory self-check tool. Have you looked at that? Does it work? What can you tell me?
But maybe, by the way, the moment that some company publishes a report, why do I look into these reports and in which order? For me, the ones about threat actors that nobody's ever heard of before, those are like high priority. I mean, if it's
But every
about
Western threat actor is now in that category because no one here or no one else is reporting on Western threat
I
actor
would
activity.
just like I'm super excited to look at the Eastern threat actors that nobody's heard
Just
of
new,
before.
just new.
Anything
The only
new?
problem is there aren't any, or
Really?
whenever
It's
there's
rare to have like a brand new actor pop up.
yeah, it's like what was it, the Laundry Bear? Also, we didn't get too many IOCs for the Laundry Bear, correct? But
Well,
yeah, I mean, for me, this is like obviously it's interesting on from that point of view. There's something new,
Well,
and
well, keep
I,
going,
go
keep
ahead.
going.
I guess it's also relevant from the point of view that this is a report from a Chinese company, and like I said before, I am pretty confident that Chinese companies they know a lot. They know a lot more than what they're publishing,
Well, look at what
and
they said. We've been tracking this since
since 20
2023,
correct, so
right?
they've known about this for 2 years already. There wasn't any information. And even this report, I mean, if you look very carefully, and I was checking it very carefully, then I also checked the screenshots. And by the way, there are some IOCs in the screenshots on Twitter that are not in the report. So, like for instance, the IP addresses they talk about like a digital ocean and so on. They're not in the report; they're just the domains. So it's still worth to take a look at the screenshots if you're hunting for IOCs. But I typically start from checking my own home network. Whenever there's something new, that's the first thing I look.
So did you find
Have
them?
I been
Are they
have
in
I
there?
been on before? Did they get me before?
Which phone are they on? Which one of the phones?
Not the phone, but the whole everything, like all the network, all the home, all the all the traffic logs going back to 2018. Because unfortunately, in 2018, one of my SSDs holding the logs crashed, and I lost all the
No,
logs before 2018. So
crashed.
now, yeah, crashed exactly. What was it? A Kingston SSD. So your
Hmm?
mileage may vary, so who knows? But yeah, I was looking at the report, and what was my feeling is that they know a lot more than what's in this report. So this report is probably prepared on a rush because there was some interest to their posts on Twitter. So they prepared the report with some brief information. But I think they know a lot more, and the
You
relevant
always
part
know a lot
is
more, right? Like even your own reports that you're publishing, there's a ton of stuff that
every
you're
single
holding.
time.
Your
Well,
No,
we
well,
know. Not
you
every,
you
not
know.
everyone who's publishing a report knows more than what they put in the report.
There's goals. There's like obviously we split first of all, is it like a competent report or incompetent? If it's incompetent, like all bets are off. But if it's a competent report, you can split them either. It's a cannonball, like cannonball is APT1. So Mendian comes and they drop APT1, and it's essentially game over. Everything's burned. It's going down in flames. That's a cannonball. Or it's like one of these tiny drips, the Chinese drip, however you want to call it, like a drop
typical,
of
right?
water.
It's very, very typical.
And
I
it's
mean,
just
Microsoft,
correct.
CrowdStrike,
It's a
Mandiant,
bit
all
of
these guys. It's just
information,
yeah.
no IOX, but like, and it's either because we don't have time, or because we don't want to release, or because we are selling the bigger report,
You have a
or
marketing pressure to get a report out on time because it's
yeah,
already on the
correct.
calendar. We're gonna announce this on
Or
July
even
18,
in
and yeah.
some cases, companies do it to trigger a reaction from the adversary. So they publish it and they watch the adversary in real time react. So let's say they have access to their CNCs already. They have extreme monitoring over the internet. Maybe they even compromised an operator, and they drop that news and they immediately watch what the threat actor is doing. Is it shutting down everything, only some things? Are they changing the tool set? So I think that this is one of those cases in which they are
Yeah,
dripping
so
a
you
bit
get a
of
second report. You get a
information.
second report saying they're scrambling to shut down. Juanito, you're
Possible,
smirking.
possible.
I don't know. I think in this particular case, I do want to avoid the mirror fallacy on the analyst side because I think we know how people do threat intel well in the West and how we do it among our friends, but we don't really know the
Whose
dynamics
phone
that
is
are
buzzing?
not mine. We don't really know the dynamics in how the Chinese are leveraging threat intel. Like I said, right, it's an English report. It's being published, like even more so, like they're actually publishing at a conference, which is unusual, right?
The report is on GitHub.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everything about it says that there's kind of like some general projection, and then there's the part where you go, well, we, yes, there is an assumption that they're doing this in some level of coordination or with at least the blessing of the government, but to what extent that is being deeply coordinated, I think is something that we should kind of hedge our bets on a little bit. Like, I think that there's this oversimplification. China is a massive, massive country. Their tech sector is truly massive on its own. And what I would suggest, not naivete about like, oh no, the Chinese government doesn't have anything to do with this. But if the Chinese government suddenly tells all these companies, hey, it's fair game to publish whatever the fuck you want on these American APTs or Western APTs. Just make them look bad. It's part of the national mission to show that the West spies just as much as the Chinese do. Then you're not going to see coordination anymore. All of a sudden, it's fair game. And it's the same thing that's happened in the US. In the US, it's not any overt coordination with the government, but from a marketing standpoint, people have said, "Oh, you have this axis of evil. If you want to publish on North Korea, China, Russia, Iran,
Yeah.
like go ahead. No one gives a shit. No one's gonna give you a hard time. No one's gonna complain. The government's not gonna be pissed. Your customers are not gonna be pissed. So go for it." And I think that's particularly relevant with all, I said I'm writing an op-ed. I think it's particularly relevant with this Iran-Israel situation where, Israel, as we said, right, an unobjectionable cyber superpower just went full bore on Iran, one of the subjects of a million APT reports. And everybody just kept going, where's the Iranian activity? Oh my God, what are we going to see from Iran? And you go, you know what, guys? I'm not saying they're shitty. I'm not saying they don't have anything, but we made a mountain out of a molehill because it was okay for us to report on the Iranians and it was not okay for us to report on the Israelis. And now that distortion and that bias is shaping what we expect to see, and you're just not going to fucking see it. You're not going to see
But
it in
you're
the
comparing
capacity
the
that
two
you
there
expect.
because that's the mistake we made with the North Koreans as well. We dismissed them as incompetent and so on, and now we're seeing their leaders in these crypto bank hacks and all of this magic money stuff.
Well,
And we had this conversation before of dismissive
yeah.
in one hand and impressive on the other hand. I asked this again because the Iranians, we're being told by CISA and everyone is sitting in our water pipes and our water infrastructure, and they can do this and they can do that. What is to be believed?
Well, I mean, we discussed it last time, so I don't want to kind of go right back into the same conversation. But those are they're two important examples. I think you are positioning the right two examples, right? Because the Iranians and the North Koreans, as far as APT operations go, since 2013, 2014, we have looked to them as the erratic players. And that's the thing that always made them different and weird and concerning, which was to say, everybody has APTs and capabilities and some interest in doing cyber. Most people, especially back in 2013, 2014, were spying and trying to be stealthy. This was all covert. It was about living in these networks, collecting information, doing things without nobody noticing, except Iran and North Korea, who were trying to settle scores and like play out really stupid, petty squabbles like Sony Pictures Entertainment and Saudi Aramco and whatever, where you go, you just burned your strategic access that the victim did not know you had, that you could have had forever, presumably, to continue to spy on them and leverage that information somehow in order to do a public wiping attack and do what? Send a message and therefore increase. I mean, how much did Saudi Aramco cybersecurity spend increase since the Shamoon wiping operation, right? Like everything about it throws off the strategic calculus of what you're supposed to be doing as a mature organization. And I think that's what freaks people out about the North Koreans and the Iranians. Now, on the North Korean side, I think you're completely right, Ryan, that like when we talked about Blockbuster, when Operation Blockbuster happened, and that's when we first get the Lazarus naming, shout out to Novetta and Dre, those guys. Dre is back in the circuit. I saw him at SleuthCon. He's
Nice.
back. He's at Ancora. It's a consulting company. So like, I'm very excited to see Dre back. He's the one that coordinated all the Novetta reports, the Operation SMN, Operation Blockbuster. So I'm hoping that means it's like the resurgence of some cool stuff happening there. So shout out to our friend Dre. And then the interesting thing you get is the Lazarus of that time was not a very good threat actor. It was not a very careful threat actor. They'd been around since, I think, 2008. And it was okay to look at them and go, yeah, they're all right. And to continue to say, hey, they're all right. And then it happened. I mean, my realization happened on this fucking podcast fairly early on when Costin goes, yeah, did you realize that they just like found a 0 day in the compiler for this cryptocurrency smart contract, whatever. And you go, like, I had to kind of take a step back, right? And like reassess, because since the Swift hack, since we split off Blue Noroff is when you start to see, okay, this is not the shitty Lazarus of before. Clearly there's better talent. Clearly there's some slightly, there's greater capabilities. I still do not think of them as a very strategic threat actor. Like the 3CX smooth operator, I think, was a prime example of wasteful misuse of access. You had access to 6,000 organizations and you did what? You leveraged it to go after 5 cryptocurrency exchanges? What the fuck are you doing? You had like a solar wind style access to some shit and you used it to hit 5 cryptocurrency. Like, again, but as we've discussed before, I think the motivations are just, the incentive structure is just completely wrong. Now, back to your original point, the Iranians,
We haven't seen any level of exceptionality in anything.
I don't think we have not seen it consistently. I think Hamid made a very good point with this Temple of Oats. Like we were starting to see things like, finally you see like a well-developed rootkit. There's a couple of moments where you see flashes of like the Iranians doing interesting shit. You go, oh, okay. But
the idea that these people have universities that are creating nuclear weapons and they can't do APT just doesn't jive with me. It feels very much like the initial days of dismissing and maybe it's because we're comparing it to the Israelis, which is like, if you're going to compare it 1-to-1 with the Israelis, sure. But to dismiss them entirely as like these poo-poo guys who don't know what they're doing feels very, very dangerous.
I think that it is not dismissing them on the basis of complete, either racism or conjecture. It's dismissing them on the basis of the activity we have observed. Like the things we have observed are not impressive for the most part. There's nobody saying that Iranians as a people are not smart or not capable. But look at what happened, look at our last episode, right? Hamid Kashfi is a brilliant researcher, and he has zero fucking interest in working for the MOIS or for the IRGC. People, like, when you have this, like, denied area, lockdown country where people are being repressed and thrown in political prisons and whatever, really smart people are not dying to go work at like the repressive, shitty bureaucracy of that government. They want to grab their shit and get the fuck out. And they should go and live a better life in Europe or in the US and use their skills towards whatever it is they want in the safety of a country that isn't going to suddenly throw them into a prison and beat the shit out of them for no reason.
Costin, you have a thought on this? You remember the famous magic quadrant, the Gartner magic quadrant of APTs? Do you remember
Of
where
course.
the Iranians were then? And would you move them top? Like, where would you position them now? Just based on this conversation around like competence and the kind of things we've been seeing.
Well, strictly from what I have seen recently, I think I would position them further down and to the left, because I think in terms of operations activities, Iranian groups, they've shown like some kind of downfall, if you want, like in terms of their abilities, capabilities. This may very well be due to the fact that the country is, of course, in the end, it's people, right? It's people who do this research. So your talent matters the most, as Juan was saying. And if your talent is hungry, or they need to work 2 other jobs to feed their families, or if, they just can't concentrate on that because there's tons of other problems like inflation and not being able to pay rent or afford an apartment or have
Paycheck
food
coming
or
2
water.
months late and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if those are becoming issues, you can't deliver top quality research of any kind. So compared to the wonderful slides from Vicente Diaz and Serge Lefranc from South in Singapore, 2019, I think it was, I would say that the capabilities, maybe they're not as sophisticated as before.
They've regressed.
Probably they've regressed. I think so. While everyone else, if you look around the world, everyone else has become more agile, adopted some kind of new philosophies, doctrines, orbs, mobile malware, hacking routers, all these like developments that we've seen during the last years with pretty much all the other APT groups out. I don't think that the Iranian APTs have been able to adapt them too well, at least for now.
Juanito, I want to just pivot quickly to a story. I don't know, we probably will not spend much time on it, but I want to flag it. We have a top FBI cyber official quoted in Cyberscope as saying, Salt Typhoon has been largely contained and dormant in the networks, locked into the locations they're in and not actively infiltrating. I guess that means exfiltrating information. Brett Leatherman, the new leader of the FBI cyber division, said in a recent interview, it doesn't mean that they no longer face a threat. It just means that we have contained them. Is that believable? Are we at the stage now where we feel like that issue is under control?
I mean,
Say something nice about the FBI.
I'm not. I'm trying my best to just ignore the FBI in this whole situation.
What's
so,
the latest on Salt Typhoon? Is but like
Yeah.
I mean, we
No.
spent 20
Remind us.
of the 52 episodes on Salt Typhoon.
What is
Remind
Salt
us.
Typhoon?
No, wait. So the reason I'm hedging so much with this is there's like 4 different claims wrapped into that statement, right? There's Salt Typhoon has been contained. If Salt Typhoon has been contained or not, I think that is almost entirely the work of the ISPs and the
What the hell
relevant
does contain mean?
organizations. Well, that you beat me to it, right? But look, let's just say, right, if there are places that tend to have some very competent people, old hands and folks who like know their shit, it tends to be the ISPs. They might not listen to them, but you have some really old school, like smart networking folks, and some of them have some pretty great threat intel teams. And I suspect that if they, once they figured out that those folks were there, they must have done all kinds of shit to try to manage that situation to the extent that they could. So has Salt Typhoon been contained in the places that we knew they were? I would suspect that those ISPs have done whatever it is they could to manage that situation. A, I don't think that, B, I don't see where the FBI takes credit for any of that shit. C, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about with like containment and exfil. Like if you're telling me that they're, this is the masturbatory fantasy of the, what were this, deception tooling that people got really into like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where they were like, oh yeah, we're just gonna put them in like a fake environment with fake data and they're never gonna
They're
know
locked
they're
in the
there.
location they're
Yeah.
in. What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck that's supposed to mean. And also, frankly, like this is a threat actor that what we're being shown is truly top notch, like genuinely top notch. They're adapting their operations to limit our visibility, to limit our collection capabilities, to take advantage of the blind spots created by companies like Cisco and Citrix and Fortinet and so on, where they're not wanting to deal with this situation has turned into a boon for the attackers, and they're taking advantage of it. And I think that means that should inspire a certain amount of respect, and particularly like I think one of this country's greatest follies in the past, I don't know, 100 years is going to be having offloaded all counterintelligence work to a myopic internal facing organization like the FBI that's like more of like a being housed under the Department of Justice and not being a proper intelligence organization. And now we're seeing it shine in matters like this in cyber, where you go, this is so far out of your wheelhouse that you should not be the people running point on this shit at all. Like this just doesn't make any sense.
Are we ever going to get official documentation on what the fuck this thing is? I mean, we've largely known nothing other than headlines, right? Not even our friends at Lumen. None of these companies have documented anything officially or publicly. Do you think that comes eventually? Like, why is all of this still so classified?
I don't think that's going to come anytime soon unless there's some tangential way in which that information becomes available. And I'm saying that not because there aren't competent people, not because they don't know how to write these reports, but the second that it became revealed that the original targeting included President Trump and the president-elect and everybody around them, this got way too
political. Yeah,
it just became way too political. How the fuck does a company like Lumen come out with just a purely technical report about Salt Typhoon when every reporter, every article around it is going to mention that the president got popped, and the president may read that and decide to trash Lumen in a press conference, right? Like it's almost suicidal to touch. It's like a third rail type of thing. So there's the part of this that's like the complicated, difficult APT operation and this complex counter intel side of it. And then there's the like fucking
the
third
political
rail,
equities that you have to take into consideration.
Like the stray voltage coming out of this thing is, I mean, I'm a fairly reckless person, and I don't know how I could look at one of these companies and say, yeah, go for it, absolutely, publish, right? Like,
it's interesting that Maria Bartiromo asked the President of the United States about Salt Typhoon and some of these Chinese infections in the U.S., and he says, well, do you think we don't do this too? Like, we're better than them at doing this too. So that's on record on television this week as well. So here we are. I guess that's what you mean by it being a political thing. Costin, you got some thoughts on Salt Typhoon, or are you just bored of all of this shit?
No, listen, I'm not bored at all. On the contrary, I find this case fascinating. And it's fascinating from the point of view that it seems to me that the industry or the world or a beautiful country has gotten itself in a situation from which there's like no exit. There's no simple way out. You can't publish that because the president will get upset and he'll go on TV and trash you. Then your officers, they lose their top secret clearance. You know how it goes. So like all this like thing which is happening behind the Salt Typhoon, to me, it's absolutely fascinating. I can't imagine this happening anywhere else in the world. And being like such a big shit, such a big story, so many high-profile victims, and have almost absolutely zero public insight or call to arms or indictments, if you want.
And there was a call
to
attempt.
arms.
The CS,
Where is the
there
call
was
to arms?
There was an
the
attempt to have
saddest
the
shit.
CSRB look at this, and that was also the plug was pulled on that as well, which was, and there's some school of thought about what the usefulness of doing that. Like, how do you investigate something that's alive and still ongoing? Shouldn't it be a retroactive thing? And you put the same people who were there to protect it to investigate themselves. It's just like silly. But I don't know if we'll ever know for sure if Salt Typhoon is even a real thing. Like, at this point,
Oh,
it's just
what are you talking
headlines and
about? No,
officials close to
no, no.
someone.
No, it's a real thing, and we know that. We know people who have worked on it because the ISPs have had to deal with it, because these companies, like,
Right, but we
not to
only know this
mention-
because an official close to someone said this in a Wall Street Journal headline, right? Like,
No, we know so look, let's parse that out. And like, I really don't want to keep fucking talking about these stupid typhoons, but like, let's parse that out, right? On the Volt Typhoon side, we only know because of an official saying whatever that was the warp positioning bit, and that like, I think that's one that really needs some scrutiny and it actually just needs more information, right? Like that one I put on a shelf somewhere. It's symbolic, but it's not substantiated in my book. The Salt Typhoon bit, it's just too fucking politicized because of the targeting, but it's very real, and very real people have dealt with it, and we do see clusters related to it that have been well documented by companies like Trend Micro and Signia, people who've talked about Demodex, and people who've talked, like, there are components of this that, you get into that shitty fucking Chinese APT fallacy now, which I think, honestly, the better Chinese APT researchers need to get a handle on this. The more that you turn Chinese APTs into these inscrutable, uncharacterizable things, the less the rest of us want to deal with your bullshit. If any time I'm going to publish something about a Chinese threat actor, I know that whatever I put out there, somebody smarter is going to come out and say, yeah, well, but it is kind of the thing, but not quite the thing. And you go, well, fuck it. I'm not going to go get a PhD in like tea leaf reading to figure out which APT I'm dealing with. Fucking tell me what it is that's going on here, characterize it better, or just leave it alone and let me just put out a cluster in peace. The bigger issue with Salt Typhoon is simply that the politicization of it and the market interests of it have kept any legitimate grander overview of information from coming out. And part of that is the people investigating the thing are the people who have the most to lose from saying anything about it. And that's primo threat intel misaligned incentives in the year 2025.
one day we might get a Mandiant report, you think?
I mean, I don't know that I want a Mandiant report. I want
I want something. I want anything that says this is real. Like any sort
Ryan,
of like show me the IOCs, right? Like
what you
Costin
really-
says, no IOCs, no nothing.
What we really need here is some kind of, multi-seal NSA, CSC, CSIS report that says, okay,
ANSSI.
this is ANSSI. Like, this is what happened and this is what we saw. And because the minute they do that, they take the political risk out of publishing. And then everybody else can rush out and say, well, the government said it was this, and this is what we saw.
Here's what we have, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on very quickly. We have
If
this
I can
week.
ask just one subversive question.
Go.
I mean, there's okay. So leave aside the Demodex rootkit, the thorough reports from Trend Micro, and just
Thorough reports. Come on.
look a bit on the other side of the world, where everyone's saying like, there's no IOCs because these guys, they don't use any kind of specific tools. It's all hacking. They don't use any specific IP addresses. Nothing is unique. Everything is just random. There's only just pure hacking operations. And then I come and I ask the subversive question. If it's all random and there's like no IOCs and nothing, how do you still know it's Salt Typhoon? And is it, I don't know, just some other random activities?
What's the subversive question?
Yeah.
That's a subversive question, and it's subversive because I think there are other things, and people, they do know it's Salt Typhoon, and the fact there's no IOX and there's no indicators, that's all bullshit.
Here we go.
That's why it's a subversive question.
Well, that was my point about the speaking to the threat researchers who are into the China thing, right? Like it's becoming an insular little club that I think is doing more damage than good to these people who, like, anyone I've ever talked to who's really into Chinese APTs, apart from being some kind of masochist, is always begging other people to work more on Chinese APTs. And yet, it's unbelievably inaccessible. Like, if I can't take somebody from like, if I get a new researcher and they're like, oh, what should I look at? What should I work on? In what conscience do I tell them, go work on Chinese APTs? No one is ever going to think you did this right. No, everyone's going to tell you you're wrong. They're never going to tell you why you're wrong. And there's a shit ton of like backlog institutional memory stuff that's completely inaccessible to you. Good luck. Yeah, this is the area that you should focus on. Like, if these people are that interested in having more support, they need to figure out some way, some primer, some authoritative whatever that you can go to and say, okay, this is the menagerie of Chinese threat actors. This is what makes this one this and the other one that. And for some of them, like Salt Typhoon, you're going to have to say, look, Salt Typhoon is fucking epic. Same as like Hafnium. The original Hafnium was fucking epic. But information about it is just not available. And anytime you think it's them, it may not be them. With Salt Typhoon, a lot of what we're seeing is, I think there's a more complex clustering and grouping structure there that is not being accurately described, probably because we don't understand the dynamics involved, right? Like, maybe it's an MSS shop and it has 17 different departments that all work in coordination, and one of them is the IAB one, and the other one's the rootkit one, and the other one does X, Y, and Z, the other one does SIGINT, and we just have a really fucking hard time mapping that stuff because we don't understand the organization. And I think that's a valid thing to say, but just telling everybody that, whatever they say is going to be wrong, okay, that's fine. You're going to own that space, but it is going to be a very small space, and you're not going to get a whole lot of help.
All right, let's move on very quickly and follow up on something we talked about with Hamid on the last episode, which was the Nobitex breach, this crypto company where $90 million was just kind of poofed into like these vanity wallets. Following the episode, there's been a leak of the source code of this entire Iranian crypto infrastructure. Costin, can you give us a Magic Money segment here on what we learned from this source code leak? Anything interesting at all popped up here to you?
Yeah, so first of all, I did an analysis of the source code that was published by Predatory Sparrow about 2 weeks ago, I guess now, and it's about 300 megabytes compressed, if I remember correctly. You don't have probably to look at all the files. So what I did actually in there, I started with some of the most important components, and in particular, there's a settings file. A Python settings file, which has a lot of, let's say, core functionality for that application. So now Nobitex, it was a cryptocurrency exchange, and to be honest, a pretty decent, if you want, modern and capable cryptocurrency exchange, in the sense that it did support multiple chains. It had integration with Iranian banks, so you can move money back and forth from the magic world to the real world. It had a lot of logging, monitoring capabilities. So it was, I think, a pretty decent, well-written cryptocurrency app. Even just to give you a random example here, they were careful to encrypt all the secrets in the source code with the key that was stored as an environment variable. And when Predatory Sparrow leaked the source code, they didn't leak the environment variable for that, meaning that you can't decrypt any of these secrets. There are some test accounts and test information like plain text passwords, but very little. Most of the code is actually, in my opinion, it was written pretty okay, quite decent. Now, it's interesting that they were actually taking some kind of precautions. So, for instance, one of them, they were afraid of being blacklisted by the United States,
They were
having
already sanctioned, though, right? The
sanctioned, of
exchange was already
course,
sanctioned, yeah.
not to deal with sanctioned addresses and so on. And they were actively developing workarounds. There's a document in Farsi that Hamid found actually, in which they were documenting and kind of, let's think how we can bypass this sort of sanctions. So, for instance, what's the issue here with the magic money? That if you operate a sanctioned wallet, the moment that you operate a transaction from there, which goes through, let's say, even a mining pool that controls, that, let's say, respects those kind of sanctions, or in case of Tether has the power to freeze or seize those funds or to burn them. So they were careful to avoid such situations, and they even had a cold wallet. Again, in my humble opinion, that's not a cold wallet, pure cold, because it was essentially another server. And allegedly, when this hit, they moved most of their funds, like, 80%, 90% of the funds into the cold wallet. But again, if the cold wallet is just yet another server, I don't know what to say about the success of that, or how well designed it is. There was, by the way, another report about this, which is why we're discussing it, right? From TRM Labs. They also perform a analysis of the source code, pretty much in line with what I said about 2 weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in my opinion, it would be good if more people looked into this. I know there's a lot of researchers out there who are hunting for vulnerabilities in that source code, and you can expect, like, the Lazarus type of people, they're like scrambling to find vulnerabilities in the Nobitex source code. So when it comes back online, they can just pop it with an exploit.
That was going to be my question. Is it offline now?
It is offline, yeah.
The entire thing was hacked offline.
Oh,
Juanito,
yeah.
quickly, what is Predatory Sparrow? What's the objective of releasing the source code and all this data? And what are your thoughts on what people have found in there?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this one, and particularly all the Predatory Sparrow operations. I mean, I'm genuinely fascinated by the Predatory Sparrow subset of Meteor Express operations, because they tend to that is where you see overtly, right, destructive attacks meant for, originally for signaling, now for full on, like, destabilization to some degree, and that destabilization seems to be focused on the financial sector, which I think is important, meaningful.
Is that critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, if it isn't considered critical infrastructure, it should be, but it absolutely is critical infrastructure. And I'll tell you, like, you want to see a country tear itself apart, like the minute ATMs stop spitting out cash, people lose their absolute minds, as well they should, right? Those are your life savings. That's what you're going to use to feed your family. And as the more unstable things get, the less anybody's going to fucking use credit cards or loan you anything, right? So even if you think about it, like, if you need to grab your shit and get the fuck out of the country, like, what are you taking with you? Like, what are you going to use to support your family if you cross the border to wherever? So it is a key point of, like, destabilization to target the financial sector. Now, I think Predatory Sparrow has done some very interesting things in that general sphere. The Nobitex one, I think, is the most interesting and the most curious one. In particular, like, we had discussion about this last episode, and I mean, I don't share Hamid's kind of frustration and concern about, whether the warning that was given to people who kept their funds in Nobitex was entirely performative. I don't know that it was, in particular because first of all, the 90 million that got burned, Nobitex apparently had something like 1.8 billion in funds. So I am very curious what the 90 million in particular was. These guys Predatory Sparrow was all over this fucking place. So I'm pretty sure they probably could have burned a much more significant amount of funds if that's what they wanted to do. So I am very curious whose 90 million got burned. If it's like the exchange's money, if it's a particular set of accounts from the IRGC, I don't know, but I'm curious. The warning in particular becomes much more interesting when you focus on the fact that they said they were going to leak the source code. So to Costin's point and to your point about like, well, the North Koreans are for sure looking for vulnerabilities in this, I think, it's relevant to the people who have their funds there and must be waiting, trigger finger itching to get their funds out of there. The Predatory Sparrow gets to accomplish their true goal if everyone who's holding funds in Nobitex, the minute that shit goes online, takes those funds out of there as soon as possible, right? That is what will keep Nobitex from becoming a functional organization again. I also think the vulnerabilities bit is going to be very interesting if you consider that if Costin is saying that this is a pretty decently coded thing or like well put together thing, well, you just gave me a open source blueprint for starting my own cryptocurrency exchanges, right? Like, so other people are very likely going to try to spin this up again. And that means they're going to carry forward the same vulnerabilities that folks are going to be finding in Nobitex. So interesting future coming for us. What I am much more curious about in this is the TRM Labs characterization of Nobitex is not of a cryptocurrency exchange. It is of a sanctions violation mechanism for Iran. Like, and Costin, I'm curious because I never looked at the source code. I have not looked at the source code. So I'm curious if you agree with that characterization. Because if it is, like, that makes the Predatory Sparrow attack make so much more sense than just, here's a place that Iranians have money, let's fuck with their money. To some degree, that is part of the goal, but there is it makes a lot more sense to punish this thing strategically at the beginning of the war, like right opening fucking salvo to say, this is the way that you have been enabling people to take Iranian fiat currency and violate sanctions worldwide unpunished just by letting them go on 25 different fucking cryptocurrency chains and move their funds however they want. And I think that is actually much more important.
I think Costin mentioned it. The TRM Labs report mentions integration with Iran's domestic banking system, showing that Nobitex was deeply embedded with the Iran fiat payment ecosystem. Live API credentials for platforms like Shitub, Pay.ir, Vandar, and IDPay were hard-coded into the source, enabling real-time fiat deposits, withdrawals, account verification within the country's heavily sanctioned financial system. They're saying this was a full-service financial bridge. Users could move money around seamlessly, bypassing the entire international banking system. This is very, very relevant to you, Costin?
Well, one of the things that I find very relevant or like a bit surprising here is that why aren't more sanctioned countries doing the same? So after all, if you are, let's say, a wealthy individual in one of these countries that are under heavy sanctions, be it, I don't know, North Korea, Russia, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and so on, I would expect them to pay more attention to these mechanisms, because in the end, these are probably nowadays some of the best methods of accumulating wealth. If you're a wealthy individual, to store your wealth, to move it around. If you want to go on vacation with your family, to pass some of those money to another company or agents in that country, and then they will pay for you whenever you need to go to have dinner or stay in the hotel. They'll pay for you. So the only surprising thing to me is that they are not more popular. I mean, I think that probably sanctions also need to catch up a bit more with this mechanism.
With this magic money world entirely.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can, of course, list wallets and you say like, this wallet belongs to an IRGC commander It's blacklisted, sanction, whatever. But then in practice, not all cryptocurrency exchanges and not all mining pools actually block any kind of transactions associated with that wallet. I mean, if you receive or if you try to send money there, they just don't do that. Remember, I was having like some discussions about this with one of my friends from Zenga wallet, and he was saying something along the lines that everybody, of course, wants to be compliant. So yeah, you want to be able to do something about it, to block some wallets, but nobody wants to invest. So you need to do something which is just about enough to try to prevent this kind of shenanigans and to be compliant with the sanctions, but no one will take it as a priority. Because in the end, remember that exchanges, whatever, they just profit from whenever people move money through there. They take a commission, a percentage, so for them it's profit. So nobody wants to shoot themselves in the foot. And especially they don't want to project the image that they would somehow otherwise block people's money or reject them or seize them or steal them for a fact. So because of that, yeah, I mean, it's still possible, but sanctions also probably need to catch up a bit with the real situation on the ground. This is what we're seeing. And to be honest, I guess this is why Monero has been gaining so much. I mean, this privacy-focused cryptocurrency, which exploded in price recently, mostly due to China. This is what we assume because a number of Chinese exchanges that were heavily involved with the mafia and money laundering, they've been shut down. Some of their stable coins pegged to the dollars collapsed, and this is when we presume that the Chinese criminal ecosystem decided like, okay, we've had enough. We're going to go the Monero way. And with Monero, it's a totally different kind of business, I guess. And yeah, I mean, you can pay, for instance, in Switzerland, there are shops, supermarkets where you can pay with Monero. You go there, you buy whatever you want, you pay with Monero, you walk out with your goods. So, like, if you ask me, yeah, the mechanisms need to catch up as well, but I foresee some kind of pressure or toughening of measures against the Monero guys as well, unfortunately, because of the abuses from Chinese criminals and potentially, why not, other sanctioned countries in the near future.
Do we know if cyber warfare related activity is included in ceasefire negotiations, or those like Predatory Sparrow activities are completely separate?
I was saying the same, exactly. Now there's a ceasefire. Will Predatory Sparrow stop? It's important to say that actually they stopped. There hasn't been any new Predatory Sparrow
but we only know when they tell us, right? We only know when they tell us.
Absolutely, I think they give. It's like in the song, they give peace a chance for now, and we'll have to see how that goes.
What do you think, Juanito? You think, but wait, is it even being discussed, you think, in the diplomatic boardrooms? Well, you guys need to cut out some of the cyber activity as well.
I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, we have no, we have no way of knowing that part. We have no fucking clue. What I will say is there's something very interesting about Predatory Sparrow in the fact that they didn't just come online for the war, right? They've been around since before. They were doing things before the war, and to the point that we were discussing with Hamid.
Yeah, they were in Nobitex for a minute. They didn't just pop into Nobitex and gotten this.
Nobitex, man, like they've been everywhere, right? Like and they had access to everything, and the whole point of it was to essentially be prepared and leverage these things in whatever way they felt was appropriate at whatever time they felt was appropriate. And I think that's worth pointing out because there is a difference between Predatory Sparrow and like general Meteor Express operations in Iran before the war and then during the war. And I'm very curious if the thinking around that is segmented enough where they would say, okay, we will stop doing the war type disruption and we'll return to the pre-war fucking around with these guys, trolling and whatnot. Or if they go, well, the thinking around this by the Iranians is not nearly nuanced enough, so let's just stop the whole thing and not piss them off. I don't know. I really don't know. But I am super, super interested. More than the specifics of all these attacks, I'm most interested in the essentially the war doctrine and the style of thinking that is being shown by the trends in the attacks over time.
All right, today is July 4th. It's a holiday. I got to go outside and put some ribs on the smoker. So we're close the show. A nice hour and a half in with some shout-outs. Costin, you go first. Any shout-outs this week?
Well, shout outs to my lovely family who was very, very caring. And also, I'm not the only sick person in our family. Unfortunately, our dear cat Luna, whom we found on the streets, more like she found us on the streets, and we saved her from there. So it turns out that she has cancer.
Oh, no.
She had surgery, and she's now recovering from that. So
How
we
old
were
is she?
a bit devastated. We suspect, we don't know for sure how old she is. So we think she's maybe about 6 or 7, something like that. So we randomly found a tumor, had the surgery, and now she's recovering. She's a bit better, to be honest. Today she was running through our house for the first time since she got the surgery. Typically, she was fighting and chasing the other cat pretty much everywhere, jumping on us, like throwing things around. So I hope that she's recovering. Thanks to the doctor Razvan, who performed the surgery on Luna. Thank you so much, sir. And that's pretty much all from my side. If you
Shout
guys
out to
have
Luna, and I
cats,
hope you
know
feel
how it
better as
feels.
well.
Thank
I know
you.
you're heading
Thank
out
you.
to get some IV right now. Hope you feel better by next week. We're back into full mend. Juanito, we're ramping up with LabsCon. LabsCon, all the submissions have been sent to the program committee. The voting closes on July 14th, I believe. So we should be having an agenda before Black Hat, you think?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, let's see if we announce it before Black Hat or not, right? Like that. It's kind of like RSA, right? Like that's a vortex of information. Do you really want to publish it too close or not? But yeah, we're basically getting there with a CFP. I don't know. It's been high drama times around LabsCon in the past couple of days, so I'm reeling a little bit from it.
I noticed you made
yeah.
an announcement in our LabsCon alumni chat. The conference itself is this very strange invite only, vetted. It's also very, very difficult as communities get larger and larger to avoid. You call it drama, but like the inevitable conflict that pops up. What are we talking about here?
I don't know, man. I hesitate to even talk about this like in an open forum. But what I'll say is, the conference has been amazing. We're going into year 4. The whole point of creating an invite-only conference is not just to have like the cool kids club and to be exclusionary, but rather that we want a forum where people can go on stage and say, look, this is my TLP read information about this thing. This is the tracking, the secret mechanism that I've used to track these wallets, that I've used to track this infrastructure. And for folks to feel safe in doing so, that they're not gonna, that it's not gonna leak, that it's not gonna get put on social media, that they're not gonna get fired because somebody said the wrong thing to the wrong person or somebody called their boss. And somehow we've managed to do that for 3 years now, without major incidents and with reporters in the room and everybody. And there's a lot of complexities that come in trying to maintain that. The same way that there's a lot of complexities in doing that for trust groups where you go, like we're all friends, we love each other. Nobody wants to have the awkward conversation of saying, hey, so-and-so is my buddy, but they're misusing the information that we've given them, or they're misstepping in this or the other way. When I say drama, because there has been drama around it, because we had to do some enforcement actions around rescinding invitations for very specific individuals, and that has turned into drama against, like some of us personally, right? So I got kicked out of a group randomly. People are saying that I'm doing like, that I'm the one doing TLP violations. Like it's all become somebody tried to call our CEO. Our CEO's laughing his ass off about it. It's but it comes with the difficulty of doing community enforcement. And, anybody who has ever had to maintain a trust group knows how fucking hard that is.
Yeah. One of the things about LabsCon that I like is the public code of conduct and the fact that all these things is documented. There's a very weird thing with presentations that are TLP protected with journalists in the room who are there to provide coverage. And there's that fine line between respecting TLP and respecting us. And I can write about this slide and not that slide. It's like this weird thing. Do you struggle with that sometimes too?
It's complicated and it kind of sucks, right? And it's like the conversation we had around PivotCon, which like I love PivotCon. PivotCon is basically the European sister conference for LabsCon, and born of folks who are attendees. Shout out to Pasquale, and you were frustrated with us, Ryan, because we came out of there and we were like, honestly, we're not too sure what we can or can't talk about, but
right,
that's the. But dude, that's the trade-off, right?
And don't fucking invite the journalists to write out stories on your shit.
Hey,
that's
the
all.
journalists are not the problem. The journalists are not at all the problem. But no, like I think, and look, even to the journalists' credit, there's a handful of journalists who are part of the alumni and the alumni chat, and they're there for sensitive conversations. And never has one of these folks taken something that we said in a Signal chat with 300 alums now, where like sensitive stuff gets shared, and they're not out there like posting that stuff, and God bless them for it, but it also means that you have this kind of beautiful rolling conversation where like we're 3 years in, we're going to the 4th year, everybody's sharing the stuff that like I can barely keep up with the fucking messages in that chat myself, and it's a beautiful thing, but it takes some protecting. And I think I'm kind of reeling a little bit at like some of the difficulties around that, but I think it's worth it. I think it's important for folks to feel safe. I think where this originated says, I don't ever want to have a speaker look at me and say, oh, I would bring that to your conference, but actually I can't because, right, there's folks there that are going to violate TLP or have done X, Y, and Z fucked up things in the past. And that's just gonna have to be the thing that we work with. So,
right.
Anyways, drama aside, agenda will come. Ryan, you'd wanted to do some of the Sandia, some of the countermeasure stuff. You're gonna pull it, or?
Yeah. No. I mean, I have a couple of things on the list here. We've gotten emails from folks at Sandia, just like listeners there who I don't know why these fucking people listen to us, but listeners who have given us shout outs, and we wanted to pass that back along to some of the folks. I mean, Juanito, you've been very harsh on CISA. But these guys are pointing out, listen, CISA is helping to invest in a lot of free tools and a lot of free utilities that are available for defenders. And one of these is this Thorium project available at GitHub, at the CISA thing. It's a file analysis data generation platform for orchestrating and doing all of this stuff. So this is just one of many. I mean, Sandia is just one of these labs, right? Like, how do we... One, I wanted to just shout out the people there who are working on these things, probably for, very little motivation, very little incentive, and just doing it for the good of all of us. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those folks as well.
Yeah.
Say something nice about CISA to close the show.
What about Sandia?
Well, so like, I mean, bless the folks at the national labs, particularly, Sandia and Lawrence Livermore, some of these other places, PNNL. I think it's super cool. I give CISA a lot of shit for the public facing stuff, all the PR stuff, but I think some of the coolest stuff that CISA did and does is fund some of these open source projects that actually become differentiators in things that people actually need, and that there is no incentive to giving to folks in a non-commercial way. So we just found out about this other project, Thorium, which we should post a link on. But you have sort of like a malware pipeline and things that are being developed, funded by CISA. And this is precisely the kind of stuff that we hope to see more of from CISA, and credit where credit's due. So, thanks, guys.
Great way to end a July 4 episode. Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll catch you again next week.
Thanks, guys.
Happy Independence Day.
Thank you, Costin.